So thank you so much for tuning into Culture Fix. I am joined by singer-songwriter David Archuleta, whose 17-year career has been nothing short of extraordinary. Since capturing hearts on American Idol in 2008 and releasing his massive hit single Crush, David has continued to evolve as an artist, blending powerhouse vocals and deeply personal storytelling. David's latest release includes I'm Yours, Rather Be Lonely, Held Together, and my personal favourite, absolute banger, Afraid to Love. And David has just released a cover of George Michael's iconic hit Freedom, which really pays such loving tribute to the original. So, David, thank you so much for joining me. It's a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Wow, what a nice introduction. That was very nice of
Good,
you.
good.
And I'm glad you like Afraid to Love.
It's
Oh,
such a great song and it's so empowering and feel good. So yeah, it really, really speaks to me. I think it's a great one.
oh, I'm
Um,
glad. I'm so glad.
let's talk about Freedom though, because obviously you just released this. Um, it's such a beloved track. You know, George Michael, such an icon. What spoke to you about Freedom?
Oh, goodness. I mean, well, growing up in a community and a culture where you're, it's freedom isn't really encouraged as far as sexuality, sensuality. I'm still learning how to be free with my sensuality and my queerness. It's something I grew up for years saying, okay, I think a lot of queer people experience like, oh, you gotta check yourself to make sure you're not too gay
Yeah.
or too queer in your um, behavior, your mannerisms, your feelings, and constantly check like you're constantly like measuring yourself, like making sure you stay in line. So to now live life without those boundaries being necessary, it's like, oh, but you're so used, it's almost like you're on autopilot with those boundaries on. So it's like, okay, how do I turn those off? So that's what I'm learning. And I feel like the more I do music and sing and perform, it encourages me to push my boundaries. And so freedom is one of those pushes, trying to channel the George Michael energy, because I feel like he did that so well in a time when it was so taboo and still not accepted. Uh, I feel like he pushed those boundaries so much to make it easier for people, and I'm just like, thank goodness um, that George Michael was so that because when I heard his message, like freedom, like heaven knows I was just a young boy, didn't know what I wanted to be. Um, I was every little hungry schoolgirl's pride and joy, and I guess it was enough for me. Starting as like a teenager when I was as a singer and gaining a fan base, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's telling my story. Like I feel like he's speaking to me, even though this was 35 years ago. And for him to say, I think there's something you should know. I think it's time I stop that there's something deep inside of me. There's someone else I've got to be. Um, and then freedom, freedom. Uh, I'm like, wow, like this song is like amazing. And I need that energy in my life right now. And I think a lot of us do. And so it's just part of that, like paying tribute to someone who was such what is it called?
A trailblazer.
Paved a way. Trailblazer, thank you. I was like Waymaker. I'm like, that's a Christian song.
That
I don't
works too.
That's like a worship song I used to sing. Waymaker, miracle. Trailblazer is a better word. Um, yes.
Yeah, I totally relate. And I think a lot of queer people will really relate to that message. And I think, as you say, George was so good at just not really caring what other people were saying or doing. He just did it and he embraced it and he kind of encouraged us all to really live openly and just embrace who we are. So that really does come through in your version as well. It's still got that euphoria and like just kind of pride to it, which I think is must be quite a challenge when you are covering quite an iconic song. Is there an element of nervousness about saying, okay, we love George's version, this is my version?
It is. Oh my gosh. By the way, you said Euphoria. That's one of my favorite songs by Loreen.
Oh, yes.
Euphoria. Um, okay. Yeah, it's when you have someone who's as iconic as George with his career and also just his persona and his voice, it's like, okay, like it always feels like you're taking on quite a task. But I feel like even before I came out, I would channel some of George Michael because when I was on um the competition American Idol in 2008 when I was 17, there were a couple of versions of George Michael that actually of songs like Long and Winding Road and Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. And my dad was a big fan of George Michael, his voice. And so he would say, David, you should really listen to George Michael because you have like a similar, your tone reminds me of his. And um, he sings in the same range as you. And I feel like you sing with a lot of the same what is it called?
Yeah, inflection.
I think so. Yeah. And so he's like, just listen to him and see if you can channel a little bit of that. I'm like, okay. I'm like, fine. Like, I don't know. I didn't think too much of it then, as much as I started to in my 30s. But he just has this swag to him, and I'm like, I would love to be a little more of that swag. I don't think I have the same swag, but I'm like, maybe I can find my own
Yeah.
in from being inspired by his. But he had soul, and he was like that blue-eyed soul that he had so well that I very much love as well. Like I grew up listening to gospel music, um, like soul, like Kirk Franklin and Tamala Mann and um, Mahalia Jackson and Smokey Norfolk, Jonathan McReynolds, all these like real gospel, um, but like black gospel music, not like Mormon white gospel music. So the way that George, I feel connected to that as well was yeah, it was nice. And in honor of that, like my version, I wanted to model after his MTV Unplugged version because he had like a gospel choir. Like they were singing in a circle, and I was like, I love that. Like I would love to bring that energy in. Um, and so I did. The producer of that I worked with, Phil Lawrence, he works with Bruno Mars. He worked on his 24 Karat Magic album. And he's like, my siblings and I, we sang in church. And he's like, I want to get my siblings to sing on this. And he did. And I'm like, this sounds amazing, Phil. Oh my gosh. You killed it. And I was like, I need to go back and re-record the vocal now because I'm like, you feel this different energy when you feel support from other singers and feel their soul. And so I went back and re-recorded to make sure that it felt just a little grittier and a little more. I just wanted more energy in it, but I'm happy with how it turned out.
It's so funny that you mention like the gospel and the soul elements because that really does come through, and it's one of the big things that hits you when you listen to it. It feels like a big like it's coming from the heart. It does have that sound, so you've definitely achieved that.
Thank you. We did have a George Michael medley, so that George sang with us on. I forget that. Oh my gosh, you reminded me. So it's like I did this George Michael song, and we literally did a George Michael medley that he came out at the end to sing, which was pretty fun. It was um, yeah. So
It's come back to you.
unfortunately, I didn't get to meet him. They were like, "Okay, when you sing your songs, and by the time George comes on, like we need everyone off the stage." So that was unfortunate. Um, but I guess we still shared the stage with him to an extent
Not many
because
people can say that.
yeah, it's like singing a bunch of his songs and then him coming to sing as well. So
Um,
yeah.
We also, I would love to talk about a little bit about your current inspirations because I'd read that recently you've been really inspired by sort of dancing and sort of raves and festival culture, and that's been
Yeah.
a real kind of source of freedom and inspiration for you. What is it about
Oh.
that world that's connecting with you right now?
I I feel like it's been hard to know how to take off the Mormon training wheels in my life, where it's like, this is wrong, this is right, do this, don't do that. And constantly watching, like, am I behaving? Am I a good boy? Am I a good Mormon? Don't swear, don't think these things, don't feel any sexual thoughts and feelings, and don't be a larger personality, like constantly having to, whereas in an EDM festival and raves, you don't have to care at all about any of that. You just let go and are free, and you dance, you feel the music, you can express however you want, and you can dress however. And it's like it's a spiritual experience. It's you feel connected with everyone, and um it's been the best place for me to feel that freedom and learn how to be comfortable in my own skin and not set any boundaries and then move forward in life living with that. It's like the things I look the most forward to are the EDM festivals. So it's been fun. It's like my little treat. Like when I after a good, I mean, it's rewarding to release music and do performances too, but it's also like, oh, now my escape is to go to a festival and just have fun and trade bracelets, candy with other ravers and dance alongside them and um just feel connected to humanity for a moment, even though like most of those people I won't see again. I mean, I'll make a friend or two here and there, but most of the time I'm just like, hey, this is nice sharing a moment,
Yeah,
rocking out to a song with you, and then they get lost in the sea of people. And
something quite nice about that, I
it's
suppose. Yeah.
I do. I love that. If I'm hammered enough, then I'll like get their numbers. What's your number? What's your name? But usually I just kind of let them be, and
Yeah.
they let me be.
Do you think that's kind of had a sort of ripple effect on your own creative process and the music you're creating now? Do you think there's a direct link between this kind of embracing of like EDM and your kind of current releases?
I've written a couple of songs with the EDM, a few songs with the EDM influence, but I've been nervous. I feel like I'm still like, oh, should I? I don't know. What do people think of me? I've cared too much what people think of me. And I think it's starting to finally get to a point I'm like, okay, stop caring what people think.
Yeah.
Stop it. And I have to constantly work on that. It's like a bad habit to worry and be a people pleaser. And it's like, will my audience be happy? But it's like, David, your audience isn't the same anymore. It's not a bunch of Mormons. I mean, Mormons, there's still Mormons who follow me, but it's not like, will it get the approval, the church stamp approval? Like, this is acceptable and appropriate before God, or their idea of what God's approval is. It's like, like, don't worry so much about that anymore. So I'm hope like with this next single that I'll release, the next pop single, I'm hoping to just kind of be a little more absurd, a little more flirty, and hopefully that'll allow my creativity to just flow a little better and just have fun and yeah,
Yeah.
be a space where people can also step into and feel free. That's my goal. So, but I've got to just keep pushing myself to so that I can do that. And it's challenging. It's challenging after being such a good Mormon all my life. I was like a really good Mormon, too good.
Gold Star Mormon.
I really, for real. Oh my God.
But you know what? It's great because I think, your recent releases, there is that kind of sense of openness and like unpicking must be years worth of kind of ingrained Like, this is how I behave, this is how I should sing, this is what I should release. So I think it's nice because I feel like you're kind of unveiling layers and like really showing a kind of quite deep side of your kind of yourself and your music. So yeah, it's all good. Continue on
Well,
this.
thank you.
Um, so am I right in thinking you've got a new memoir that you're working on as well at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, how
Yeah, I've
is
been
that
working on
process
that.
going?
It's been challenging. It's been great, and it's also been challenging because it's like, okay, what do I talk about? Like you can get a lot more in depth with things. I I talk about growing up Mormon and how good of a Mormon I was to then trying to understand who I was. Um, Mormonism taught me that if you're a Mormon, then there's no space to be gay or to be queer. Um, it's basically like, well, if you choose that, then you're not leaving space for who you really are, which is a child of God. And it's I feel like it's quite confusing because it's like, well, who are you to say that that removes my identity as a child of God just because I'm queer?
Yeah.
And so you think that you're having to choose one or the other, and it's like, no, there's space for both, but they try to make you think otherwise, because um, and it makes it a very controlling environment for queer people to try and exist in. And you get to a point where you wonder, okay, well, do I just abandon this? But they make you feel, well, but if you abandon us, then you are leaving everything. You're leaving everything. Your salvation, your happiness, your joy, your family, your potential to remain with your family in the next life. And it can be a mind fuck for real, because it's like, okay, if I accept this ever about myself, queerness, then I'm losing everything. But you can never escape it because it's a part of you. So then you think, well, if I accept this, maybe, that means I lose everything I have. Maybe it's better for me to shorten my life because I don't want to risk losing everything in the next life, as they're telling me, which a lot of Mormons do. And I almost did. So, you get to a point where it's like, okay, how do I change the way I think so that I can accept myself? And even if that's potentially risking my eternal salvation, why would I want to risk my eternal salvation just for accepting that I'm queer? That does not sound worth it to me. So I discuss the process I had to go through in order to accept myself. And hopefully it will be a way to help other people who've, especially if they grew up Mormon or religious, to choose themselves in their life, even if that means there's that potential risk of losing their salvation. So I'm hoping by talking about my experience, it'll hopefully even save someone from thinking taking their life is the right option. Um, it's not. If it's a spoiler alert, it's not. And hopefully, hopefully reading the book will help them understand why. And also for other Mormons and other religious people to help them understand why it's important for queer people to choose their queerness. Because many of us spend all of our lives trying to choose to be anything but queer. And you just learn that that's not really an option. And it can be an option, but then you're constantly having to live in the state of denial and constantly suppressing, which in itself is a mind fuck. So it's, it's, yeah, I go into those details. I go into details about American Idol, being a teenage pop star when I was, and my Mormon mission. I was a missionary, even like I left my music career to be a missionary in Chile, South America, for 2 years. Like I was very devout. I was devoted to it all. So it's crazy to look back on.
Yeah.
And here I am now. I got my ears pierced. Like that was like a big thing. I was like, oh my gosh, what are people gonna think of me if I get my ears pierced? And it's like, David, why do you give a fuck what people think? You're not even a fucking Mormon anymore. You literally are a queer boy who does things with naughty things with boys now. And so it's like, don't, why do you give a fuck what anyone thinks? So I
Cheers to
got my
that.
ears pierced and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But that was the Mormon in me. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I love that idea of like constantly like hitting away this former Mormon, just like, no, no, go away.
I know. I need to. Sometimes you have to be like, back, back, because he tries to creep in.
Yeah, the little
Not
Mormon
that he
who
was terrible, but in ways it was terrible because it's like you thought that that was true. It was real. It's like, you know what? It can be a choice to live that way. But I feel like what's frustrating looking back on it is Mormonism and religion in general makes you feel like, no, this is the only way.
yeah,
You, it's not a choice. It's what you must do. And if anything, it's like, no, you're convincing me. It's almost like you're brainwashing me to think that this is the only way, that I have no choice but to live this way. And now that I'm out of it, it's like, oh, that was completely optional. But you made me feel like there was no other way I could do it. I had to be a heterosexual, obedient, good boy that didn't swear, that didn't drink alcohol, that didn't drink coffee, that didn't drink tea, that had to pay my tithing, 10% of everything I owned, to the church. Otherwise, I would not be a worthy a worthy man, and I would not have God's blessing. And now I'm like, what blessing?
yeah.
Because they'd be like, well, you'd always have the Spirit with you, and you'd have eternal life and salvation. It's like, what blessing? The blessing of considering taking my life early for those blessings that probably aren't even real in the end is what I've learned. So it's like you were willing to let me consider taking my life for fake blessings. That's very frustrating. And many people that I know of have taken their life for your so-called blessings that I'm learning aren't even a thing. And you're still letting it happen. That's very frustrating. And when you try to talk to them about it, they're in denial. What? What people? Oh, we didn't know about that. It's like it's happening all the fucking time. And you're letting it happen. You're responsible for these deaths. I'm very frustrated about it. So, um, and just the fact that I look back, I'm like, I almost did that. I was one of your like chosen ones, like that wears a staple poster boy. And I still didn't think I was enough. So I don't see how any of these other people are going to feel like they're enough, and they're still in that cycle. But there are a lot of beautiful things about it, like community and learning to be a good listener and the power of music and discipline and working hard. Like there are a lot of those beautiful things, but I feel like some of these other, what I was just talking about is very dangerous.
I think
It was very dangerous for me, and at least I got through it, but a lot of people don't. And I think it's horrifying, really. It's a horrible thing. It's
and
not just with Mormonism, but religion in general. Sorry, what were
no,
you saying?
no, I was just going to say, I think the memoir does have a real place because actually, like you say, there will be hundreds of thousands of young people in this position that feel like you felt, feeling trapped, feeling like this is they have to abide by these rules. And actually, even just hearing you speak like that so openly about, your life is better now, then hopefully that gives them a glimmer of hope. There's an exit. There is a happy life that awaits. They don't have to be scared of this fire and brimstone.
That's what I hope. And I feel like culture is changing. I feel like the Mormon church's culture also changes depending on the political environment of the US. It's really what it comes down to. So as those changes occur, the church adapts maybe 10 years after. Unfortunately, we're in a bit of like in limbo politically right now with accepting the LGBTQ plus community because a lot of fear mongering is going on. but I feel like they eventually hopefully need to accept that. But there's a time I go into a lot of this detail about my conversations with church leaders in my book. But one of the things I'll say that I touch on in the book is something that my friend Dan Reynolds from Imagine Dragons, he's the lead singer of Imagine Dragons. He grew up Mormon as well, also served a mission. And had this he did this event called Love Loud to reach out to the youth in Utah, particularly the LGBTQ plus youth, because it was showing that Utah had like the um, highest suicide rate amongst youth. And it was correlated with queer youth because they felt like that's what I'm like, and I get it because I was there. I literally was in that same place. So, but the church was then responding. It went out amongst all the culture. It's like, oh, it's not LGBTQ plus youth. The youth are fine. It's associated, and it has nothing to do with the church. It's affiliated with um, altitude. And there was like a research, there were news articles about it. There was saying studies show that altitude um, affects this. And so they were not taking accountability for how the way youth are being conditioned to think about themselves. That was very much a big issue in especially with the Utah and the Utah culture, Utah Mormon culture. And so the lack of accountability, I think, is frustrating as well.
Imagine.
And I believed it when I'm like, oh, well, but you kind of believe what you're told. It's like, oh, it doesn't have anything to do with LGBT youth. It's the altitude. Look, here are the results. The studies show it's the altitude. And I look back at it now, I'm like, oh my God. Like I literally fell for that. I mean, maybe altitude has an effect, but I mean, now looking at how feeling like I was risking my eternal salvation if I accepted being queer was a much bigger issue. So I had to like make the choice. I'm like, well, do I keep living even if I'm queer, or do I try to save myself? I thought that I was saving myself by considering taking my life. So I don't know. It's like, and for how praised I was in my community and how close I was to the church leaders, um, and I was concerned, I'm like, I can only imagine how much harder it is for anyone else, for someone who's not being watched, who's not being seen, is not being praised and adored, and is just a quiet little scared queer kid who has no support, no voice, and it feels pretty hopeless. So I'm hoping that by talking about my story and writing this book, that it can it can get people to look at it, really consider it, and think differently about everything.
Yeah. I think it sounds really interesting and I'm looking forward to reading it. Um, let's talk music again. What's the plan? Is there maybe a wee album coming or a little EP? What are we thinking in terms of grouping the
Yeah.
tracks together as a project?
Yeah. So, and oh my gosh, sorry, I went so heavy there.
No, you know what? I really
That's
appreciate the
my
openness, and
problem.
it's been really
Uh,
interesting because we have Mormon culture in the UK, but it's a
yes.
different ball game in the US.
Yeah. But yeah, the music is this place of coming out of it. You like coming out of the dark. There's a Gloria Estefan song called that. And it's weird because it's like a place that's supposed to, it's like appears like such a luminescent, light-filled world, but it's like you're portraying yourself as, I just have so much light in me, but you're feeling so much darkness and hopelessness inside. And to now be here and be like, you know what? Oh, I'm living a life that they told me was bad, and I feel filled with light because I'm not ashamed of who I am anymore. And I have nothing to hide anymore. So it's like being true, like being real. I feel like there's literally what Mormonism taught me was truth is light. But they didn't want me to be truthful. So now that I'm being truthful, it's like, oh, I feel light, but it's in a way that you told me was bad.
Yeah.
Confusing, another mind fuck, but we're here. And I'm gonna sing about being flirty and being an adult now and mature. And the next single will be very flirty, which is something that David Archuleta has not done. Like, even Afraid to Love, like, I was not flirty with it because I was still like, how do you be flirty? I don't really know how to. It's too much. And be sensual. It was kind of like the prelude to like allow myself to not be afraid to fall in love with someone. And sometimes it can get a little messy when you're trying to find someone that you can click with. And but it's fun to write about and sing about, and I'm going to. And I put a little bit of Spanish in there, which will be fun. And I can't wait because I'm Hispanic, and this is the first time I really get to sing about it in my pop music, and get in touch with my Latin roots. So I hope people enjoy it. I got inspiration from the pop girlies last summer, and just looking forward to having fun.
Nice. You're gonna have your Sabrina Carpenter moment.
Yes, yes,
Amazing.
very much.
Well, I'm conscious of time, and I know we've maybe got about 5 minutes or so. So I would love to wrap up with just some rapid fire questions. The first thing that pops into your head, getting to know David, anything that kind of comes to mind. So,
Okay.
what is your go-to karaoke song?
Let Me Love You, Mario.
Nice. Um, if you could only listen to one album for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, you know what? It's been the new SZA. Like what is it? Lola? What is it called? Lola? It's like her SOS deluxe album, but I think it's called like Lola.
Nice,
I'm so bad with this song. Thames album too. I think it's just called SOS. Lana. SOS Deluxe Lana by SZA.
nice. What is the guilty pleasure song that you have? Do you believe in guilty pleasures? That's maybe another question.
Ooh, a guilty pleasure song. Oh, yes. Automatic by the Pointer Sisters.
Oh, that's a great tune.
Do you know it? Oh my
Yeah, love
gosh.
it. Love the Pointer Sisters. See, you're saying guilty pleasure. That's just a pleasure for me.
Oh, good, good. See, it's because you don't have the guilt. I need to get rid of the guilt. I need to follow in Andrew's footsteps.
Amazing. Well, a song that you love that you wish you had written. So maybe a song you've heard from another artist that you thought, oh, I wish I wrote that.
Oh my gosh. Burning by Thames.
Your favorite movie.
Finding Nemo.
Oh, nice. That's wholesome.
Yeah, there's a Mormon in me.
The last song that you listened to.
The last song I listened to, what was the last song oh, Ron's song by my friend Ryan Nealon. His EP just came out today,
Nice.
making me cry, like literally on my way to do these interviews.
Nice. So we can
I wrote
speak
my song
about
Held Together with him.
nice.
Anyway,
Who is your all-time favorite singer?
my favorite singer. Ooh, that's a tough one. Favorite singer? Stumped me. One of them I could say is Whitney Houston.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good choice. Would you choose a banger or a ballad? Maybe new David would choose a banger, and maybe Mormon
A
David would
banger.
choose a ballad.
Yeah, probably, but definitely a banger.
Um, what's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear? Oh, probably to like not be liked by anyone. The
Um,
rejection.
yeah, it's never easy. Favorite animal?
Chickens.
I
I
love them.
love chickens. They're just cute.
They are. Where is your favorite place to travel?
Japan.
Nice. Never been. Love to go.
Oh, you have to. It's incredible.
Your worst habit?
Licking my lips
That's part of the
and
fun,
saying,
really. Who would play you in a film?
who will play me? My goodness. Who could play me? I don't know. Oh, maybe. I mean, I just met. I don't know who's
Tough
like
one.
young enough to play a young me. I'm like Joe Locke. I just met him. He was sweet,
Oh yeah.
very sweet.
That's a nice choice. I think he's destined for great things. Um,
Yeah.
well, David, honestly, it's been so fun talking to you, and I really appreciate your openness, and it's been so interesting to hear your story. And I know everyone watching is really going to kind of relate to, well, or maybe relate to some elements of that and really embrace your journey. And it's been really interesting to hear about that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew. It was lovely talking to you.